Hey guys, it's Rachel. It is Thankful Thursday. This week we're going to be starting a new rota. It's going to be a 4-week rota because I've had a couple of messages and Ariel has, and I know a lot of the other girls can relate to this on the channel, concerning kind of what to do when resources aren't really available. And one of the questions that I was asked quite recently was to do with care being transferred from private care to the NHS. Ariel's focused on care within the US, and I'm going to focus on the UK, and I think that that's kind of quite a good thing, because obviously there's quite a few differences. There's a lot of similarities. There's going to be a lot of similarities with the videos, because what we're going to be looking at, I'll go through the week basically. This week we're going to be looking at elements of treatment which are out of your control because of issues such as insurance, money, referrals. Then we're going to look next week at what you can do if you can't access services. Then we're going to look at what you can do in that between period of waiting for services. And then finally, which is something I hadn't thought of till recently, and it's something that Ariel picked up on, which is when you sort of know that when you sort of can figure out when you've come to the end of your treatment and when to walk away, which I think is quite an important one, because I think quite often on the channel we make videos and direct them at people who are in early stages or in recovery. We never really, well, I certainly hadn't thought about the people who were towards the end, and I know a lot of people who watch our videos are doing well in their recovery, and so I think it's important that we make a video that's kind of based around terminating treatment, even if you're not at a point to terminate your treatment at the moment. So this week we're going to be looking at what to do when elements of your care or your treatment are out of your control due to cost, insurance, parental influence or referrals. In the UK, private care and what I presume costs the NHS, if you are to be in a place such as the Priory, it's probably around a base rate of around £6,000 a week, 6, 12, 18, yeah, so you're looking at like over £30,000 for the month. That's your base rate. If you've got somebody who's struggling with suicidal ideation or self-harms, or is at risk for some other reason, with eating disorders, it can be because a person is of an extremely low weight or have severe bulimia, or the severity of their eating disorder can be severe in a number of different ways. They will need more intensive treatment. A lot of EDUs have intensive care units for people with eating disorders who are on bed rest, who are on watch 24/7 basically, and that's going to bump up your costs. I'm aware of these costs because of using private care myself. I've worked on the NHS, and I'm aware of kind of the costs of keeping people in hospital. They're huge. The cost for somebody to be in treatment for an eating disorder as an inpatient or residential is huge, and in this country it is very, very difficult to access services for eating disorders. They are completely overrun. The sheer volume of people with eating disorders who need treatment is too big for the NHS. There are private hospitals, but even the private hospitals, with the prices that they're charging, very few people can afford it. What has happened over the last kind of 8 years is that where insurance, such as we have Bupa insurance over here, which can come from people through work, and there's a lot of companies in this country who, as part of their package when you work for them, will give you Bupa cover. Bupa cover will then cover your costs for medical problems, mental health problems. When it comes to mental health problems, including eating disorders, they've capped that. I think Bupa, I know there's other insurance companies, that's one of the big ones in this country. Bupa will now cover, I think it's only 4 weeks inpatient. When I was using Bupa cover a number of years ago, they were covering a lot more inpatient time than that. They've now capped that at about 4 weeks, and that's for a year. So within a year you can only have 4 weeks inpatient. They then have also capped the amount of outpatient appointments you had. When I first got treatment, I was treated with insurance, I was treated through Affinity Healthcare and then through the Priory, and that was all covered under Bupa. I was fortunate in that went on for a number of years, and it also covered me in hospital. Not only did it cover my hospital stay, but it covered my therapist coming 3 times a week who worked independently from the hospital. So the care and the quality of care I was receiving then under private health care and insurance was huge. They eventually pulled out, which I know isn't only what happens in the UK. They eventually were like, you know what, we've covered, you know, being in hospital for a couple of months, few months, I think it was 3 months. We've covered outpatient care ongoing, we've covered therapists, psychiatrists and all the rest of it, and they did eventually pull out. And what I have been offered on the NHS is basically nothing. I was fortunate to have been offered treatment of DBT up at a hospital in York, and I was my father and various people fought for treatment for me, and I did get that treatment. I didn't complete the whole year, I did 4 months, so that I was offered. With regards to services where I am and services over the country, it's postcode lottery. It shouldn't be that way, but the quality of care I know that some people receive in certain parts of the country compared to what we are offered in my postcode area, I think it's incredibly unfair. I think that what should actually happen is, rather than having the extremes of having somebody who has an awful lot of care and somebody in, say, where I live having no care, is that there should be a balance. It should be about, rather than somebody having access to a psychiatrist once a week, twice a week, a therapist every week in one part of the country, to basically only having some form of intervention at some point, isn't fair, and there should be a balance between that, and that's something that I feel very strongly about. So in this country, eating disorder treatment is very limited. The people who end up in hospital are normally those who have a BMI of under 13, 12 or 13. My local eating disorder unit takes from all over the country, which I have real issues with, but this video isn't about me bitching about services or lack thereof in this country, but that is the reality. And what happens with a lot of people with eating disorders is that they don't get the treatment and they believe it's because they're not sick enough, and this is something that I find very difficult to watch, because I've seen people who think that because they've been rejected services it's because they're not ill enough, and it's nothing to do with that. I can say that because, believe me, I've been ill, not just with my eating disorder but for other reasons, and I haven't been offered help. When I tried to take my own life in the past, I've not been offered help. And if you want if you want a worst case scenario, and I know a lot of people think that if they take an overdose, or if they get their weight low enough, or if they fuck their bodies up enough, their bloods up enough, that they'll get the treatment. In this country, that is not what happens. It isn't, unfortunately. You can be taken into hospital because of an overdose, or because of medical complications due to your eating disorder, or because of other issues associated to your eating disorder, self-injury or what have you. The severity of it doesn't determine whether you get treatment, and that is a very unfortunate thing. Most people are put on waiting lists. So what I want to talk about today, or I wanted to touch on that because I do feel it's something that's very, very important, because I think it's very easy for us to think that we've been rejected treatment because we're not ill enough. If you have not been given treatment through the NHS because of your eating disorder or your other mental health problems that go alongside that, it is not because you are not ill enough. Okay? That end of, it isn't because you're not ill enough, and that does not mean that you need to get iller to receive the care. So that's one aspect. In this country, the biggest wall to recovery is getting treatment in this country for an eating disorder, and it is incredibly difficult. So I want you to know that if you're watching this video and you're on a waiting list, or you're not being given care, or you've had care for a period of time and then you've been discharged from care, it doesn't mean that you're not ill. It just means that there actually are not the services in this country, and my family have had to actually fund treatment for me. I'm fortunate Okay, I'm incredibly fortunate that they've been able to pay for that, but that money didn't come easily to them, and my parents have had to sacrifice a great deal to pay for treatment for me. So if you are in a situation whereby you cannot afford those services, you will have to rely on the NHS. But if you're on a waiting list, it doesn't mean that you're not ill. It just means that the cost of privately paying is so high that people do have to rely on the NHS. And if insurance can only, 4 weeks treatment inpatient for an eating disorder, it's certainly not enough. Recovery is a long journey, and treatment is something you will probably need for a long time if you are to maintain your recovery. If you're in a position whereby you don't want your parents, my parents, it got to a point where I was living at home and they kind of had to know. So if you're in a situation where you don't want your parents to know, you're going to have to be willing to take those steps to maybe go to your GP and see what's available. Your GP should hopefully be aware of services within your area as well, and that doesn't just have to be NHS services, but hopefully be aware of support groups that are out there. It means unfortunately, because of the lack of services, it means charities such as B are trying to build up networks. I'm trying to start a self-help network. Just by making these videos, we're trying to provide a network of support for you, in which you can go to and find support. And okay, we're only making a video, but by building up networks such as that, it isn't a replacement for professional help, but hopefully it's a support. The channel, we're willing to take emails, we're willing to take messages. Myself and Ariel have our own personal sites where you can do that also. And I'm not saying that we're going to be the answer, but we are here and we can try to guide you and advise you. I will put a link here to a page on my blog which has a list really of videos based around different struggles with an eating disorder, and I can also link you to just pages which are inspirational, to be honest with you, that are going to give you some hope. And that in itself is starting to build up a network. And also having people, it can be your family, it can be friends, I don't care where the support comes from, it has to be what feels comfortable for you, and to slowly start to build that up when cost and when things are beyond your control. And you not getting help on the NHS in this country is not about you not being ill enough. It is something that is out of your control, and all you can try to do is trust what I'm saying here, that it isn't to do with you not being ill enough, and try and figure out ways of finding support, ways to maintain where you're at, so you don't get worse whilst you're waiting for treatment. And what we're going to do next week is what to do when you actually can't get the treatment that you need because of there being such huge waiting lists. So all I'm saying to you in this video really is that it isn't your fault. It isn't that you're not ill enough that you're not getting treatment in this country. It's because services are so overrun, and I know that from my own personal experience, and I know that from working within the NHS. So I'm going to leave that now, and hopefully that can lead us next week into a video to do with what is available, and I can take questions next week concerning what is available in certain areas, and I can try and figure that out because I'll actually have my exam out of the way. So I'll have a bit more time to be able to answer some questions next week. And if you've got any questions, post it here, write to the channel, write to me, and I'll do my best to answer them. Okay guys, I'm going to go. I'll see you next week. Okay, bye.